everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of Neural Insight. We are back again, and this time with a very exciting guest with us. So I have Sue with me, as usual, my buddy from across several seas, and we have Erik with us from LA. We are looking at a very good episode right in front of you, and Neural Insights is there to provide you some deep dive, thought-provoking topics and discussions with Erik. Erik is joining us from LA. He had an extraordinary life from hitchhiking from London. I don't know how he did it, to Central Africa, to living with remote Armenian tribes in the Amazon, to building and selling businesses. Erik has a passion for giving back to the community. He's an avid TEDx speaker. He has headed several keynotes, and he has reached over 1 million people through his public speaking and live courses. He has visited 99 countries and one short of century. Erik, you can do it. And all 50 states in the USA, and has climbed the highest mountain on 4 continents and 5 countries. It's an illustrious achievement we can all be envious of. Erik, I would love to welcome you and hear from you on diverse topics of future of work. That is a central theme for our podcast. So officially, Erik, we welcome you again.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be on your show. We're representing 3 continents on this call, and I'm excited to speak with you today.
Same here. Thanks so much, Chi.
Fantastic.
And again, so wonderful to have you here, Erik. And more importantly, great to speak to you again. I've obviously worked with you for a couple of years now and totally see you as a great role model. And more importantly, I see you as someone who's genuinely giving back to all of us, especially in the way that you and I met through our book author journey, a co-author journey. And so, yeah, it'll be so great to hear your story on this podcast and also share that with our community and hopefully invite more people to leverage opportunities to give back. So tell a bit about yourself and your entrepreneurial journey to us.
Okay, so the journey is kind of winding. As the introduction said, I hitchhiked from London to Central Africa when I was just turned 20 years old when that happened. And then I just kind of followed things that were interesting to me. I've led my whole life by following what was interesting me, even over what sometimes was practical or the advice I had. And my very first book was written just for fun with no agenda at all. And that one is called Ordinary to Extraordinary. And the whole idea is there's absolutely nothing unique about me. I was born in a, middle-class family in the suburb of Tacoma, Washington, with slight dysfunction in the family, like most families, I think. But I decided to do things that people said I couldn't. I was always curious when I was young. I wasn't a good student. I flunked the 2nd grade, actually. And so if any of you out there didn't flunk the 2nd grade, you've got a step above me. But I chose to continually do things that pushed me, that were interesting, like riding my bicycle from Seattle to Los Angeles when I was 18. And then the reason I did the trip from London to Central Africa was I applied out of high school. I was a bad student growing up until my junior year in high school. And then I decided I wanted to become a college professor. And all of a sudden I went from getting C- to A's immediately. And then I studied more a little bit, but really it was a mindset shift. And a lot of these things, looking back, I can see what was happening. And for me, that was a big mindset shift, that choosing to get A's because college professors don't get A's, rather than, spending just almost the same amount of time studying, but not doing it because it wasn't important to me. And just that mindset changed it. I applied to one school, UCLA, and I got rejected because I thought I was getting A's for 2 years. Why wouldn't I get in anywhere I wanted, right? And so I got rejected, and I went to a community college for 2 years. And during that time, I realized that even with straight A's, I'm probably not going to get into UCLA. I need to do something radically different to set myself apart from all the other straight A students. And so I decided going to Africa would do that, because I read a book by Chinua Achebe. Things Fall Apart was the book. And the book didn't say the same. And it didn't say the same story as my history in textbooks in class and geography books in class. So I decided to see for myself what it was about. And I couldn't afford to get to Africa, to fly to Africa. I could only afford to get to London, was the closest I could get. And so I hitchhiked down through Europe to Spain, took a boat across from Gibraltar to Morocco, and then continued into Algeria. I crossed the border between Morocco and Algeria in 1989, which was the year, like about a month before the border closed, and it's been closed ever since. So I just made it through there, went through the Sahara, and ended up down into what's now the Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo. And then I flew back to London from Central African Republic. So and I ended up getting to UCLA. I applied to UCLA with a few different things sparked up, and I went in. And so I just kept following the things that were interesting to me. And then it culminated into the book Ordinary to Extraordinary. And at the time of that, I was vice president of international business development for a company, but the book took off unexpectedly. I had, like I said, no agenda of writing it other than I enjoyed it. And so that led to me leaving that position to speak full time, but that was January 2020. So it went great for exactly 2 months, and then COVID-19 hit and it disappeared. My speaking disappeared as quickly as it appeared. And so then I dove back into the books. And so I've been in the book space now exclusively since pretty much March 2020. And it's been wonderful. And Sue, it's been an honor to work with you as a co-author in one of the books about AI. I get to work with these amazing people and learn from them. My game has bumped up multiple notches getting to work with these authors that I co-author with. And so it's been a really, really nice place to be. My place on earth now is a conduit of finding amazing people like you, Sue, and getting messages through books to readers who are desperate for quality mindset material about certain topics. Like for yours, it was AI.
And I think that's so amazing.
I love the fact that, Erik, you mentioned that you pivoted at such an early stage. So it's quite central to someone's, outlook towards life, where you kind of come across turbulences rather than, getting worried. You rose above it. So it's a great theme to start off this conversation. So I'm truly honored to have you in this show.
Oh, I agree. And I think challenges make us stronger and better. The most interesting people I know are people who have had serious challenges, whether that they be health challenges or physical challenges or work challenges. So I think that people spend their lives trying to avoid discomfort, and I've come to try and embrace discomfort because it makes us better in the end when we work through those challenges.
And I think that's what I feel is so powerful about your journey, Erik, is you've overcome the challenges, you've found a path that works for you, that inspires you, but also now in turn has inspired others. And I think what's really special about it and what resonated so strongly about your story with me was that, we get so immersed in this virtual digital world that we're living in that we forget about the human in all of it. And you've actually demonstrated how important the human is in all of this. Whilst you've used a lot of technology and, you've brought a lot of people together through a global spectrum without necessarily having physically met all of them, and you've inspired so many of us to build our own communities in that same way, you've broken that mold and thinking around just operating in a virtual environment and actually operating in a human virtual environment. And you've demonstrated that really spectacularly well. And I think that's where the inspiration to talk about how do you keep a human in this current evolving environment when people are just shifting and moving and not knowing which direction to go. Just your career history, your journey, your personal experiences has shaped you so much through your own experience. And I take a lot of value from that because these are the stories we need to hear.
Yeah.
Because it's not all just what's out there in the media, right? So yeah, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. I'm generally not an early adapter for things, but in AI, I wasn't one of the early adapters, but I definitely came in, I think, before most and realized that something very, very important was happening. And I love that you mentioned the human element because I think there are a ton of, because I speak with people, AI experts on a daily basis because of the co-authored book projects. And there are a ton of people out there that think that AI is dehumanizing us. And I'm finding that it's possible to actually make our humanness even stronger. I'll give one example. There are many, but one of them is my kids. I've got a 19 and a 21-year-old, and they're reading these books that I read when I was in my 20s, like, Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, The Trial by Kafka, Fear and Trembling by Kierkegaard. And it's so wonderful. And I read these books about the same age as them. And as they're reading them, it's funny because all this bookshelf that I'm sitting in front of goes all the way around the room. And I love, one of my favorite things is I walk into my office and one morning and I know where every book is. There's a gap in the book and I'm like, oh, so one of my kids will come in and they'll steal one of the books and read it. And when I find out what they're reading, I reread the books because I can share with them the experience of reading. And something's different this time. When I read Crime and Punishment, for example, the first time I read it, I got a lot out of it and it was wonderful. But now as I'm rereading and there's something that's, I think I understand, but I'm not positive, or a character that I know means something, and I'll ask ChatGPT a small question. And so this relationship becomes a three-way relationship, reading the book this now, between me, ChatGPT answering certain questions for me, and my children, Jack and Ben are their names. And it's made the experience so much deeper that rather than reading the book and getting a ton out of it and loving it, I feel like I'm almost getting a college course out of every book I read because I'm able to get deeper into what the symbolism of the characters. And usually I'll read to the point where I I know that there's something there that I'm not quite getting yet, and I'll let it float for a little while as I'm trying to discover it. And then when I kind of know the direction of it, I'll often ask a small prompt. And the total amount of time I spend with ChatGPT over a book, like a 800-page book like Crime and Punishment, for example, is probably 20 to 30 minutes total on multiple quick short visits, right? And then the time I spend talking with my children is 2 hours in different conversations as we're reading the book. And so it's definitely enriched that level of discussion having between, myself, the book, and my kids using AI as a relationship builder, actually.
And I absolutely love how shown that huge human in the loop, in a different way. It's not necessarily talking about organizations bringing human in the loop, but how we as people, the end users of generative AI, for example, can actually use it not to dumb us down, but to actually encourage and enhance our thinking. And this is one of the best, most unique ways in which I'm, understanding the use of AI from your perspective, which really makes it very powerful. And I think those are the kind of ideas we need to use around, characterization and deeper dives where you may have missed something or you may get a validation from it as well, right? So there is a really powerful story and narrative around how we can the podcast episode is, what are your thoughts from various aspects, not just AI and technology? What are your thoughts on the future of work?
Oh, yeah. A quick thing I'll say is I think that particularly AI in the future of work is kind of like the calculator to an accountant, a long time ago. When the calculator was created, it changed fundamentally how an accountant would spend their time. And if somebody decided that only a pure accountant still did math on sheets of paper with pen and pencil, or even in an Excel sheet, or no Excel at that point, then they're missing out on this great new tool that we've got. Sure, you might not be quite as quick at your multiplication tables because you've got a calculator that does that part for you, but embracing that will let you get so much more done, so much more accurately as well. And with AI, I think one of the important parts is it giving us more time with all of the ways with automation and things like that. And when I say automation, I don't think AI is going to blanketly steal jobs and that's it. There are going to be new things created for people. There's always going to be enough jobs for everybody, in my opinion. But AI is going to make us so much more efficient. And then in the future of work, I think hopefully my goal is that it doesn't just make us more productive. We don't just make more things, do things faster and do more of it because of AI, that we actually have a better balanced life. I know I really looked at it. I have a chess clock actually on next to my desk, and I know exactly how many minutes I'm working through the day and how many minutes I'm doing other things like checking the news or doing a Wordle. I do French on Wordle. If I'm working, it's on one toggle, and if I'm going to the bathroom making tea or checking the news, it's on another one. And so I found that I save about an hour and a half a day because of how I use AI effectively. Does that mean that I get an hour and a half more stuff done? No, not necessarily. My day is shorter today than it was a year ago. I spend more time walking with my dog or my wife, or training to climb mountains, having coffee with a friend. If a friend says, do you want to have a coffee at 1 on a Tuesday? I no longer say, oh, let me shuffle my schedule and see if it can happen. I'll usually, I usually have to check my schedule, but I'll usually be able to say yeah, because I'm more efficient using AI. I've got that extra time. And I hope that we go that direction. I hope that we don't just become a human race of people who are hyper productive because of AI. I hope we're equally productive or more with spending a lot less time doing it, so we can enjoy more time with our family, more time doing things we love.
And you mentioned that your kids are also into AI. They are learning and they are also adopting that in their ways of life. I'm very curious to know, how do you see the generational diversity when you started your AI journey, you started to adopt it and use it for your own walks of life, and you see your kids. So what are your takes on that? How do you think AI has influenced our generations and also the generation after us?
Yeah, I think my kids' generation, so again, they're both in the university. One's a sophomore, one's a junior in university. They're in kind of an interesting spot because they're kind of at the heart of education when AI hit the stage. And particularly, I'm talking talking about Gen AI and the use of ChatGPT and other tools to do things like write essays for people. So when they were in high school, it was a big deal of using AI to, for example, just one prompt essays that get things done for these students. And I think that scared a lot of people, that they think, oh, there's no place in AI in education. And I think that's entirely wrong. But there's no place for a single prompt essay to be written by AI for a human in education either. So my children got to experience what it looked like to see students cheating using AI and trying to pull it off as themselves. And over a short period, that evolved into their English teachers, for example, and philosophy teachers encouraging the students to use AI appropriately to help with the outlining, to help with the research, and in figuring out, what is good data, what is, spurious data. And so my children, how early on, got to see the evolution of AI as a cheating tool, something really positive that they can work with their education. And in technology in general, I'm still so old school. I love my computer. My kids can do everything I can on my computer on their phone or even tablet. One of my sons, Ben, studying engineering, and he does almost everything on his tablet. And it blows my mind that they're able to do things with these, personal devices, mobile devices, rather than sitting down at a laptop with, multiple screens and, spreading everything out. And so it's really wonderful to see them embracing the technology and in ways that make them, again, more efficient, more fluid, and use it responsibly rather than just as a blanket way to get things done without having to use our brain. I think, Sue mentioned earlier the human element. And I don't know, my kids, what direction the whole generation will go, but I think that a lot of them are getting to that point where they're using the technologies wisely, but definitely using them in classrooms, in work, and things like that.
I think that the word is being responsible and how early you learn that. So when you're in your early teens or you're entering into university, you have this great tool in front of you which can get your work done. But how do you responsibly trade that? It's a great learning. It's a life lesson, I would say.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's going to be interesting, generations coming, because it's going to be, I think, in my mind, unrecognizable in a very short time. Right now, I think we live in a place like we're going to be looking back 500 years and saying, oh my gosh, look at, the 1920s.
That's so outdated.
Yeah, we're going to be, and we're going to look at this time period like the Renaissance, I think. And it's exciting to be part of that.
Yeah, it's interesting when you were talking about your kids and how they use technology as well as AI. I'm keen to ask you a bit more information around Gen Zers. And of course, you're very close to them at the moment. So, right now there's a lot of conversation around engineers becoming replaced by Claude Code, for example. That's one of the big tools out there right now. Do your kids fear not having a job? Do they fear what AI could potentially do? Not that it really makes any sense to think that it's replacing jobs, but how do they feel about the environment and the market that they have to enter, specifically because they're currently in a university-based environment?
Yeah, great question. And my kids are in totally different fields. Ben, he's studying aerospace engineering, and he knows that things like coding, for example, they're going to spend less time doing coding. But I knew other of their friends are. I know particularly of one student I'm thinking of that is in computer science and wonders if coding is going to change her job, change the way, or that she shouldn't even pursue learning some of the things she's learning now because jobs will be different. And I think we always need to know the background things. Even if we have calculators, there's no reason why humans can't still understand the math behind what's going on. We need to. And so I think it's not a great idea to avoid things just because we think AI is going to do it. The classes will be gone long before they're irrelevant because we're always still going to need humans to work with AI to have things done. My kids are not afraid of losing jobs or not having jobs because of the way AI is used. And that's Ben in the engineering space. And then also Jack, he's studying anthropology. The track would generally be going into higher education. And similarly, Jack, he's using AI a ton for anthropology. He's designing a research project right now where he's going to be going to South America. And it's amazing to see how he's effectively using AI to prepare for some of his research. And as far as even knowing exactly the background research to figure out even where he's going to go. He's going to live with an indigenous tribe in South America this year. He speaks French, so he wants to go to a French-speaking country, which is French Guyana. So he'll be on the Brazil-French Guyana border studying a group down there. The amount of time he spent figuring out his proof of concept for the research. I studied anthropology as an undergrad and a grad student. What I took 3 months doing, for example, to prepare for a similar research project, he literally did in 20 minutes. Staggering. And so it's wonderful. And also, say Jack, did go into teaching in a higher education system, AI is going to be part of everything that he works with the students. So he will have to work with that. And another generational thing, I think in the 1950s, I think people early on, even before that, the 1800s, people worked to survive. And then people went to school to have a comfortable career and then retire. And now people want to find meaning right away. School, work, retirement, all of those things take a back seat to having meaningful experiences now. So I think people are less married to one job for the rest of their career, for example. They know they have more options, and there are pros and cons to it for sure, I think. But I think it's really interesting that the next generation coming up, the idea of being loyal to work has a whole different level of meaning, because they're looking for meaningful experiences way, way earlier on. And there's not one staircase to get there any longer.
It's so true. Yeah. Sorry, Chi, go for it.
No, that's really, really fine, Sue. As in, Eric, you really got me thinking around the whole concept of job and how we have seen when we were coming out of college and what I hear about your kids. I think the whole perspective towards having one skill and, go deep down in that domain and then make a career out of it might not be something similar that the next generation will resonate. And I personally think when my kid grows up, he's only, 9 years old, the definition of job and how he makes a living for himself will be very different from what maybe I am more accustomed to or my husband is more accustomed to. And that's all credit to AI. I think if he can ride the wave, he becomes a more meaningful person. He's more, thought-provoking. He understands what he's getting into. I think AI would really uplift that person. What are your thoughts around, the changing job market? And if at all, it's actually going to be something very different when maybe our kids or your kids are entering into,
continue evolving and continue evolving very quickly. And I do think that the people who are able to kind of like adapt are going to have a huge advantage. And the people who really hold on to the way, quote, things used to be, the ones who resist technology out of principle's sake. Like I know people who say, I'd rather walk in the woods than use AI. You know what? I'd rather walk in the woods than do anything. But AI, when we're not walking in the woods, we should walk in the woods, because using AI doesn't mean that we give up nature or having a coffee or human things, but it's definitely going to integrate in. But it's also going to give people a little bit of freedom, again, with their time and things. And I hope there is still, I mentioned loyalty to work. I hope that it doesn't get to a point where, because I also think that the next generations, some of them, there's a different work ethic, because some people think I want meaningful experiences now, so I work and I have these great experiences. I think some people interpret that to mean I should do what I want to do now, and that means living in their parents' basement and having total freedom. And I'm kind of wholeheartedly against that. I have nothing against living in a parent's basement if you're going to school, going to work, but because we have the luxury now of often going back to mommy and daddy, I'm not going to use the growing up, because I think growing up is overrated, but aren't finding responsibility in their lives early enough as well. I know nomad travelers who work very well while traveling. I know nomad travelers that are spending money that they don't have to do nothing other than be a nomad. So there's a big difference between being a productive nomad out there doing what you want and getting things done at the same time, and traveling and not being productive.